Good morning, everyone. My name is Guillaume Wiatr. I am the principal and founder of MetaHelm. MetaHelm is a strategy consulting firm based in Seattle. We specialize in strategic storytelling for CEOs, executive leadership teams, entrepreneurs. We help your organization unlock new levels of profit engagements thanks to the building of a new strategic narrative. In this session, I cover one of the topics that I'm writing currently in my book, A Pattern Language for Strategic Narratives. And I will talk for 15 minutes or so-ish. And then I open it up for questions, and I welcome your comments, feedback. At the end of this call, you will receive, as always, the link to the manuscript of my book. Currently, it's a Google document, and it's a work in progress. So let me share my screen and get started on today's topic. Today's topic is the origin story. It's a topic that I started talking about last week when I introduced a model that I had been working on for a while now that I call the FourStory Model. In my opinion, as you know now, stories are different than narrative. And I've recorded other videos about this topic. I see narratives as systems of stories. And to make it accessible, to make it understandable, and to illustrate the point, I built this model based, inspired by the theory of everything by Ken Wilber. And you see those two axes, collective and from collective to individual, internal to external. And I believe, and this is a pattern that I've been observing for now many, many years, over 2 decades of work as a consultant, that any good strategic narrative can be built around those 4 stories: the origin story, the opportunity story, perspective story, and the product story. Today, we're going to focus on the bottom left corner quadrant of that model, which is something very personal, very internal, something that starts kind of deep in our heart as we lead a business. It's the origin story. The origin story starts typically with a simple question that you get asked, when you're in a position to talk about a business or your career is, how did you start? How did this all start? Which is kind of it's a very human question to ask this, right? It triggers our curiosity. We want to know. I want to start with an example of a company called Archetype. Archetype produces electric vehicles. They are based in Oregon. I think it's in Eugene or Salem, Oregon. Don't quote me on this, but it's a local company. It's a very innovative company. And if you go to their website, the first thing you will see is a presentation video of what they do. It's a new kind of vehicle, so it might come across as different. People may have questions. If you go to their website, this video is about 5 minutes. We're not going to watch together the entire 5 minutes video, but just maybe the first minute or so, where Mark, the founder of the company, tells us why he started this company. So there it goes.
Archetype. We build rides. Light, electric, ultra-efficient rides that are outrageously fun to drive. Because getting this with this is nuts. We build Archetypes for people and for delivery, and for people who help people. We're a public company because we have a public mission, and we invite you to join us. I'm Mark. In 2007, I went looking for something that didn't exist. Because then and now, we drive crazy big, multi-ton extractive rigs for all the simple trips. Times everyone, we pave over half the city, gridlocked, around a world on fire. I wanted a light footprint electric vehicle. Affordable, fun, and dialed for the everyday. I couldn't find it. And thus, Archetype, and a new platform for mobility. Twin electric motor, front-wheel drive with a burly battery and a powertrain that sips electrons.
All right. I stop here on purpose because he goes next into the product, which we will talk about in another session. This is the product story, right? But today our focus is the origin story. And Mark does a wonderful job at telling us why his company exists and how it started in a minute or so. I think it's a great example of, of a good origin story. And what I did is that I transcribed what he talks about because it's nice to see it in writing here next to his picture. And as you can see, it's pretty short, right? It's less than 100 words. In less than 100 words, we get a lot here. We get really why this company exists. What's the purpose of this company? So the goal of my talk here in the next 10 minutes or so will be to walk you through some of the key principles of what makes a good story, why you should write your own, why this matters really, and give you some concrete tips to get started on it. So why does this matter here? There is several things, but really the origin story is the engine that keeps you going and keeps you focused. It's the essential, recount of event that when you go back to them, bring back a memory, bring back the meaning of why you're doing why you're doing what you're doing. It defines your values and purpose because at some point you stumbled across something that was interesting to you or even bugged you, and you had to make a decision. Were you gonna fix that? Were you gonna just glaze over it and ignore it? And that decision was driven by a set of values that are very, very personal to you and that you put in, whether it's your career, whether it's your small business, whether it's your enterprise. This origin story really drives how we make decisions on an ongoing basis. But the thing is that a lot of the times we forget about the origin story. It's kind of buried somewhere. We don't have time to talk about it, honestly. We have more pressing issue, and that's perfectly fine. The origin story also provides spiritual nourishment. I know it's a little bit different to hear that, but if you hear somebody tells you why they started the business and you go, wow, that's inspiring. That's what I mean by this, by spiritual nourishment there. And that's something you should not ignore. We're humans and spirituality is important to us. And if you want to create a community around a new idea and innovation, you need to also consider that aspect. An origin story is also a reason to remember things. So that's what I put it here, on my slide. It's a ritual for reminiscence. It's a connection also. I will leave you here with that quote of mine, that if you want to make people excited about an idea, they need to know why you are excited about that idea in the first place. You need to be able to transfer that energy, that passion that you felt when you came across that idea. So that's why an origin story really matters. You will know when you hear an origin story because it really follows a simple archetype. I saw the pain firsthand. I noticed something, and I felt like we needed to do something. So you were not just I would say it mattered to you, right? It's not something that you ignored. And you thought, okay, maybe if I fix this, maybe if I improve that, other people will find value there. So you immediately extrapolate and think, okay, maybe other folks, will probably benefit from what I'm doing here. So what's in an origin story? A few different elements. It may vary. These are kind of the basic ingredients that I've noticed, but sometimes there are slight modifications. There is a situation, there is something, a context where you come from that I call the old narrative. In Mark's example, Archimoto example, what is the old narrative? We drive massive vehicles that guzzle a lot of gas to go run simple errands like picking up a cup of coffee. And really, it's super inefficient. It takes a lot of it takes a lot of space on the roads, creates traffic jams, bad for the environment, generates a lot of stress. And we hear that this whole narrative, according to Mark, has to change. That's his viewpoint. That's his view of the world. So then there is a triggering event. Mark goes and researches and it's like, what are my other options here? Well, nothing really corresponds to what he's looking for. So that's the triggering event for him. And what it does is that internally inside him, this creates emotion, an emotional response, maybe frustration, maybe, anger, or also positive emotion, excitement. Hey, we could do something about this. There's something interesting here, right? Enlightenment, maybe ideas. There's a possibility then. And what the origin story lands us on is this idea of motion, of movement. Mark goes on a quest to fix this. He goes on to find possibilities, technical solutions to figure this out. Maybe at first it's not a three-wheel vehicle, maybe it's something else, and start prototyping, start building something. The origin story only works if you tell the truth. It has to be authentic. Telling the whole truth, telling the whole story, in our context, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it's the subject for a book. In our context, you have to be pretty succinct. Keep in mind, it's less than a minute, maybe 30 seconds. Just this morning, I was working with the founder of a company in Europe, and I'm leading this founder through the origin story exercise over a series of sessions, so of coaching sessions together. And he came up with over a dozen possible triggering events that explains why he built this company the way he built it. And he was really into this introspective, mode, deep introspection. And then we're going to move into researching what is most relevant for his companies. So that's these are the key elements here. I want to show you another example of what an origin story, and I think a good one, sounds like. It's a video from the website called Win Without Pitching. And this is Blair Enns, the CEO of the company, that tells us, again, very briefly and very eloquently, how he started Win Without Pitching. So let's watch.
I was 22 years old when I was handed business development responsibility in the first creative firm I worked at. And I was taught how to do it the same way everybody did it, which was knock on a bunch of doors, get a meeting, go in with the pitch deck, try to win a project, try to grow that into an account. Years later, towards the end of my agency career, I was sitting in a meeting, yet another meeting. It wasn't going well. At the end of the meeting, the client said, "We'd like you to come back with some free ideas." And I looked at him and said, "No, we don't pitch." But at the same time, my boss sitting next to me had said, "Sure, we'd be happy to do that." I started to push back. I started to say no. I started to look for alternative paths forward.
Okay, I realized that we may have some technical issues here, and that's my fault. Sorry, I muted myself, and I'm wondering if the sound was probably going through the microphone. So did you hear the end of the video, or did it? Let me just what's that? It cut. Okay, so let me just finish it for you. So he was in this meeting, he refused to do RFPs, and his boss was sitting next to him and really wanted to try to win, the creative work they were pursuing the old way, and Blair kept saying no. And he started thinking about a new way to do that. And to his surprise, that new way was really, really successful. And he proved that he could win creative work without pitching. What he's referring to is the practice of pitching, which is very common in the creative industry. that leads you to give a lot of ideas for free, and spend a lot of time trying to get some business with a lower chance of success than how he does it. So Win Without Pitching now is a consulting firm. They specialize in helping creative agencies be more profitable, decrease their cost of sales, and increase their profitability. So this video is available on their website. Writing an origin story takes work, right? It's no simple task. Maybe it's easy for you. Maybe you've always thought about it. You always have, you kept, you kept it in the back of your mind. But interestingly, I find that a lot of people tend to forget. That was my case. Before I started the company that I run now, MetaHelm, it took me a while to really be able to explain, why is this that I do this job? Why does this matter? Interestingly, that those memories, those early events were kind of buried in all my thoughts. So I had to go back through the drawing board and figure this out on my own. Writing your origin story is a work of introspection. And I use the word writing very specifically because it takes actual writing to do it. Pen and paper. I'm very specific about it. Pen and paper is the very best tool you could use to do that. Some people prefer the digital tools. There are some trade-offs, but what pen and paper do for you is that they have a deeper, more powerful connection with how your brain works. The movements that you make with your hands trigger better outcome. With this origin story, you may feel like you're a little bit out of the norm, that you had this crazy idea, that it's kind of scary to put it out there, that you're going to be, considered as an anomaly, or, somebody who's kind of the crazy genius inventor, whatever you want to be. So it can be difficult. It's probably why we want to bury, those events, because we feel like we're not going to be accepted by the rest of the community here. You still have to own your call to action. So if you want this to be successful, you still have to stick to it and write it, tell it over and over. Repetition is really, really important. Repetition in different kinds of settings. It could be a long recollection with friends or a very short one during a business meeting. Brevity is here from the essence. I want to give you a very practical tip to figure how to go about this. I've seen all sorts of scenarios. I put this pyramid together to orient you. You may start at the bottom of the pyramid, writing as much as you can, as many details as you want, kind of go free form, brainstorming style. It could be a 1,500 words chapter, if you will, or more. But as you go, try to reduce, crystallize, trim, sort out things until you get to the 1 or 3 words that define your origin story. As we saw it for Blair Ants, 3 simple words: win without pitching. That's what his realization was in the initial meeting with his boss. Some people want to try at the very beginning here, and I've tried this with clients too. It doesn't really work because it's just too constraining. It's too hard, too quickly. You have to first get the ideas flowing and then, go to the top of the pyramid. You may go back and forth, but give yourself the permission to try different formats. That's how it works. Another way you can do an origin story is to draw it. So this is a big artifact. This is a 16-foot long timeline of the history of Alaska Airlines. Let me give you some context here. We drew this timeline as Alaska Airlines was merging with Virgin America. It was 4 years ago, I believe now. I was part of the project to help the merger, and I was brought in as a graphic facilitator at the time. We had gathered all couple thousands, I think, of managers from both companies in different sessions, breakout sessions. And the goal was to help people align on why this company exists and how it operates. And as you may not know it, but there were at the time some pretty big, cultural differences between the two companies. And what we did is that we organized sessions where we invited people recount the stories and the key moments, the triggering events that shaped the story and the history and the narrative of Alaska Airlines. And next to each speaker, there was a guy drawing, representing visually each of these moments, each of these events. It was almost kind of like seeing the story unfold in front of you, a little bit of a ritual aspect to it. That guy was me. I was there next to the speaker, drawing each of those chapters. I had heard the stories, but I didn't really know what details each speaker were coming from. And in the end, he gave us this big artifact. We produced a few of them. They looked, somewhat similar, but that's what the origin story did for this company. It brought people back, kind of centered them around why this company operates the way it does, and help smooth out the cultural differences as those two entities were merging. The merging is over now. There is no more Virgin America. There is just Alaska Airlines. It's been completely absorbed. That's it for my talk. I have a question for you. What is an origin story that resonated with you, that you heard in the past or recently? Maybe you saw it in the media, maybe a friend told you about it. Maybe it's your own. Maybe it's a story that you liked, a story that you didn't like. I'd like to invite you to unmute, and if you can think of an example, then that's great.
To me, it feels kind of like the Black Lives Matter movement, is an unfolding story that has a lot of triggering events. And, I think maybe they could use your services, because they need to, they need to get their messaging kind of consolidated. They have like all the reasoning there for becoming something really powerful and something that people could relate to, and really build momentum and action in what they're doing, because they have the origins of something very important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There are so many interesting comments to make here, Patricia. Well, first of all, that'd be an honor, but also a huge task to work with this movement. Also, I think it's not the work of it. Narratives are built collectively; they are built socially. I think it takes the work of many people. But I agree with you. It's a series of triggering events that got us to where this movement is, right? And one of the most salient one and biggest one is the assassination of George Floyd, that we just it was just 1 year ago, I think a couple of days ago, May 24th, if I'm correct. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm glad you noticed and you picked up on that same system here and same mechanism, for the creation of this movement. It's exactly how it is. And I was also thinking about the same movement as I was thinking about examples, on my own. This is a public example. It's a movement. What's interesting is how those unfortunate, death or crimes or unfair events act as, again, they remind people of the opportunity and the fight that is still going on. Any other example? More maybe some examples in the private or technology space, or just brands? Yeah, Josh.
I have one. I read a book last year or earlier this year called The Passion Economy, and there's a story in there about a guy whose dad had a brush company making brushes, and globalization and cheaper overseas products was like pushing that kind of business out of business, and he he went a whole different way with it. He inherited the business and he pushed into very short run specialized brushes where it's all about imagination and solving a problem that's very specific, like cleaning out nuclear facilities, things like that. So it's a really interesting story, and he didn't want anything to do with the business, and now he's just really excited about how it's working. But it's a positive business transformation story.
Right. Yeah, it came from a very specific moment also, and this person was motivated to change and do something differently. Beautiful. Like it. It's awesome. All right. If any of you want to share their origin story with me, I'd be happy to share it with my list. I know that's for me an opportunity to write it down and work on it. Opening the door for you as you continue to work on your projects, businesses, launches, keep sharing. Maybe you have another example to wrap us up. All right, I want to close it here for today. Oh, Emmanuel, yes.
I just had one who came to my mind. I don't want to make the long story, but it inspired me the way that I know, if you know, the methodology of or the mindset of appreciative inquiry from the positive psychology, but how it came up actually was through a paradox approach, meaning that the person who founded it, so Cooper Ryder, he was writing a thesis and he was studying in medical institutions to see why do things not perform well. And it was about investigating about the roots of problems, causes, and how to fix them, and so on and so on. And he went to an institution when apparently things went well. And he was studying, and he didn't find any big discrepancy, gap, or things going wrong. Everybody was engaged, happy, and so on. And he was confronted with his director for thesis. And later, so he went back, and he always came back to his tutor saying that, no, there is nothing, there must be something else because it's not working the way we were expecting it to go. And then he found out that better than investigating about the errors, the missed opportunities, anything, they should concentrate on what goes well and why they succeed and why they go well. And that's how appreciative inquiry came to birth.
So that story led him to a discovery, right? And he kept going and he was persistent with it.
To say that's going to be my mission now to
turn it into a mission.
Promote that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that example. I will take a look also. I think it would be great to maybe run it through the model of the 4 stories and how this applies. See if the pattern, sticks, keeps consistent. I'm putting here in the chat again the link to the manuscript of the pattern language for strategic narratives. Again, it's a work in progress. Those calls give me the opportunity to elaborate and generate new ideas and keep developing each patterns that I'm writing about. The origin story is the latest one. I just added to the document a few weeks ago, I think. I appreciate you joining today. Thank you so much for showing up, taking the time, taking the risk to come and listen for some new ideas, hopefully that help in your daily practice of business leadership.
Thanks for your inspiration.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Guillaume. This was great.
I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll stick here for a few minutes if you have more questions.